Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to Denby Dale Amateur Radio Club again this week. We are absolutely delighted to have one of our own giving us a talk tonight. That's Ken G4VZV. And without making him too big-headed before he gives his little talk, we were all mightily impressed to see him feature in Peter Waters' weekly blog on YouTube. Peter Waters, of course, people in the UK will know Waters and Stanton, the big amateur radio dealer. And Peter is one of the owners of that particular company. And he does a very interesting, actually, very enjoyable regular blog, amateur radio blog. And Ken featured in it at the end of October, where Peter was talking about what amazing success you can have with a vertical antenna. And he was talking about Ken's exploits. So I thought that it would make an extremely good update for Ken to come along and talk to us about the fun he had operating down there in southern Spain. So we discovered slightly earlier that Ken's operating on a netbook, and we couldn't work out how he can easily share the audio. So I've got Ken's audio clips, his video from his operations. I'm going to share them on the screen and play them one by one, and then we're going to hand the microphone open after each clip to Ken to talk about that particular clip and what he was doing and what he's operating, and then we'll play the other clips. So we'll do them. Ken sent me 6 clips, so we've got 6 short video clips to play. So Ken, do you want to say anything else before I play your first one?
Well, first, can I just show one image from a shared file, which I can do without any recording. So if I go onto a shared file now, I hope that this is going to put my, just bear with me a second. I shall share one image from here. And can you see the image?
We can.
Right, excellent. That's all I need to do then. So if you can just hold on the videos. Right, good evening, everyone, ladies and gents. Ken, G4VZV, and an update from a few months ago on the presentation that I gave regarding the pedestrian mobile. As you can see on screen, that is the pedestrian mobile outfit. So you know what we're talking about. And rather than me describe it now, I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later. It's an aluminium trolley, which is extendable upright, and on that trolley is a transceiver and various other parts of a station with a vertical antenna. You can see the pole on the picture that's fastened to the side of the trolley, and going up that pole is a wire. So that is the trolley that that I'm going to talk about. I've just stopped sharing screen. I think you should have me back on screen now. Can someone confirm that?
We can indeed, Ken.
Yep.
Absolutely fine.
Okay, right. Okay, then. So that's the trolley that we're talking about. Now, if Nick wants to play a video, but if you'll all just listen, any of the videos, Nick, and listen to the noise level, listen for the strong signals, and on maybe on 1 or 2 of the videos, you may hear some QRM from some other stations, and you may even hear a pile up that I have. So any of the videos, maybe play 2 of them, Nick.
Okie dokie. Right, hold on 1 second. Okay, here is the first of the videos.
On Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. again. Thanks a lot for the call. Very, very nice to meet you again. And hopefully you're seeing well clear provider. Echo America 5/Germany 4 Victor Zulu Victor. Echo 5-1 Japan David.
Okay, back to you, Ken.
Okay, well, I don't know if you heard, well, I'm sure you all heard that. That was Echo 51 Japan Delta. And that's a station from the Pacific Islands, from Rarotonga Island, the Cook Islands. If you want to play another one, Nick, any other of the ones that I've sent you.
Okay.
Victor Pedestrian, November 1, Echo Kilo. Microphone back to you for the final, Ken.
Roger, received, Rob. No problem copying you. So that's the second one. That was a November 1 station. I believe it was from New Hampshire in the States. What these videos basically show is that from a very simple station that I'm using on this aluminium trolley, I'm working all over the world. There's a couple of more videos that Nick will be able to show, but what I've done is I've done a few notes, and I'm going to explain why I do it and why it works. Firstly, it's a walk-along trolley. You can probably notice it's one that you can pull or push, and the battery power on it is two, well, in this occasion, it's 2 lead-acid batteries, which I think together are about 160 amp hour. Now, working these DX stations doesn't just happen because the weather's good or it's warmer in Echo Alpha 5. It's to do with the trolley, and it's to do with the location. It's a two-pronged approach to working the DX. It's a very simple station, a very effective station, but as well as being a two-pronged approach to working DX, I do take into account propagation and the time and the location when I go out with the trolley. I say it's a two-pronged approach because it is. Firstly, the trolley has got to be working very well, and you've got to connect everything up so that the efficiency of the vertical aerial that's on the trolley is working as high as possible, as near to 100% efficiency as possible. The way that's the trolley and the efficiency of it. The other approach is, you'll notice that the location on both of those videos is at the side of salt water. It's at the side of salt lagoon water. Salt lagoon is not very deep, but it's very dense in salt. There's a sort of a chemical reaction that takes place between the water and the salt. And the RF basically bounces off the salt water just as if you'd got a sheet of copper as a ground plane. It makes DX working easy. It makes pile-ups occur easily. It's all very easy, but it's also a pleasure, because why have I done it? And I've done it because obviously I go down to Spain and I realized I was close to the salt water, whether it's the sea or the salt lagoons. And I thought, surely, as well as just sunbathing and doing what we normally do on holiday, I can make use of a radio station down there. And that's what I got my thinking cap on, and I thought, vertical antenna near the sea, if I can make this work right, I will. What prompted me to do it is, one day I was at home in the UK when I heard a good friend of mine, Golf 4 Alpha Kilo Charlie, stroke pedestrian mobile. He's in Blackpool, and I heard him on backscatter across the UK. He's at Blackpool, he was on Blackpool Beach. And I contacted him by email, and I asked him why he was working a string of VK stations when I could hardly hear them. I mean, I obviously knew a little bit of the answer, but I wanted him to tell me. And he did, and he told me that he was using a ground tuning unit which formed part of the trolley. And he'd only just got this idea going. He basically is the guy that started up pedestrian mobile working. So it's not something that I've done or designed. I've just followed his actions. But what I've done is, instead of doing it at Blackpool, where it's bloody cold and rainy and windy, I decided to do it in a warmer location. But why did I do it? Not only did G4AKC tell me the advantages of it, but I did it because of this. We're all, well, not all of us here. There's some here from like Tom from South Africa, and Adrian and Mike from Germany, and Roberto there over in the States. But in the UK, we have lots of restrictions. Restrictions about putting antennas up, restrictions with noise, with neighbours. It has to be whatever we put up in the garden, and it's nearly always a small garden, it's got to be acceptable by your neighbours. You've then got masts, towers, you've got the maintenance of the mast and the towers, and nothing's more noticeable on that point than what we've just suffered in the last 4 days. I've had to guy my tower, and it actually broke one of the guy wires on the tower. And at times I was thinking, can I sleep knowing that the tower's rattling away and probably will fall over? Fortunately, it didn't. But these are the restrictions. So with that in mind, I would say to anyone, if you're interested in working DX, you want to work lots of DX, and you've got restrictions at home, if you can, if you live near the coast, or if you're within an hour of the coast and you want to go and make a trolley, whether you're on the east coast of the UK or at Blackpool like my friend David, you can work the DX provided you're near the saltwater. It's a challenge like everything else, but that's what I thrive on, a challenge to make something work. Now, here's the results. Since August of this year, so we're only going back 3 to 4 months, I've worked over 150 VK and ZL stations. I worked a new one, pedestrian mobile, that's Echo 51 Japan Delta on the video that you heard. And I also worked X-Ray Whiskey 1 Foxtrot Alpha November, and these were in pile-ups where I called 2 or 3 times and I was pulled out of the pile-up using 80 watts against some of the other stations who were using well in excess of 1 and 2 kilowatts and beams. The key to it is what Peter mentioned in a video recently. Peter G4VZV from a well-known radio emporium, and he basically said it all. It's the location, 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 and you cannot beat the low angle takeoff you get, whether you're using a trolley, whether you're sat on the ground, whether you've got a backpack, whether you're mobile with the aerial on the car next to the salt water. So the DX is possible to work. It's very easy to work, and to be honest with you, it's quite fun when you can put a CQ call out and you've got half a dozen VKs or ZLs or JA stations coming back. Right, if you want to play another video, Nick,
Okay.
any of the other videos, maybe 1 or 2 of the other videos.
Okay, I'll play a couple of them one after the other. So here's the first one. So Ken, that shot there, first of all, just shows the actual setup, doesn't it? You were talking about.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, hello, Ken. I think your name is Ken. You're coming through quite well, pedestrian mobile. I'll give you a report in the over, Ken. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning to you there, Tex. You're 5 and 9 with me. 5 and 9. Name is Ken, you've got that right. And I'm 20 kilometres south of Alicante in the salt lagoons. Go ahead.
Oh, roger, roger. Yeah, great signal from your pedestrian mobile, Ken. You're 5 and 8. 5 and 8. My goodness, fantastic. Near Alicante. So you must be somewhere near EA7BA's KDH QSL.
He's about 180 kilometres further south. Go ahead.
Oh, okie doke there, Ken. Anyway, nice to meet you there. I wonder if I think I've worked you before, Ken. Probably from your home QTH there, Ken. But nice. What are you using?
Okay.
Okay, that was the first one. There's the second one.
Victor Pedestrian, November 1, Echo Kilo. Microphone back to you for the final, Ken.
Roger. Received, Rob. No problem copying you. Yep. Are there any more, Nick, that you could play?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Another one, maybe?
Oops.
Victoria Echo Sugar from Numia capital city of New Caledonia. Echo Alpha 5 Stroke Germany 4 Victoria Zulu Victoria. This is Foxtrot Kilowatt for Romeo Delta from New Caledonia.
Okay.
And here's the last one.
On Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. again. Thanks a lot for the call. Very, very nice to meet you again. And hopefully you're seeing well clear of the virus. Echo America 5 / Germany 4 Victor Zulu Victor. Echo 5-1 Japan David.
Okay, thanks for that, Nick. Right, on those videos there, the first one was Victor Kilowatt 5 Tango Echo X-ray. I think it was in the Adelaide area. The second one was another DX station, and then you've got the third one, which was a second part of the video of Echo 51 Japan Delta. So you saw the clarity, or you heard the clarity of it. And they're coming through really strong signals, which really leads me on to how and why does it happen? Well, firstly, as Nick showed you on one of those there before he started the video, the trolley is approximately 3 feet high. The equipment is stacked vertically on it and consists of only 2 or 3 items, 2 or 3 parts of a radio station. Firstly, you've got your transceiver. My transceiver is an FT857 Delta. It covers all HF, VHF and UHF, and I can just vary the power by going into the menu button quite easily. Also on there is an ATU. On that trolley that you see there is a combined ATU and ground tuning unit. It's actually an MFJ device called an MFJ 934. And like I said, it's a combined ATU and GTU. You've got then your power supply, which in my case, well, it's usually one battery at about 75 or 80 amp hour. And then I use another one as a spare. Of recent times this summer, because I've been giving it some real hammer with this and going out almost every day. So I've been recharging them up overnight, the batteries. One of the batteries is starting to drop a little bit. So what I've done is I've joined them together in parallel to keep it at 12 volts, but I've backed it up with the failing battery. So in effect, I've still got a good supply on there that'll keep me going for, I think, 2 hours to 3 hours, bearing in mind that we're not transmitting all the time, I'm listening as well. So that's what we have. And then we have the antenna. The antenna is very important. I could have used anything as an antenna, but I chose the cheap way out, which is to buy a fishing pole, 5 meters, well, it's 5 and a bit, and I run a wire up it vertically. And that wire is cut for a quarter wave of the band that I use. On some of those videos, you'll probably have noticed, or if I show you another one, a picture, you'll see a little bag at the side of the trolley. The bag is what I carry with me over my shoulder, and in the bag are single quarter wave wires for each band, 10, 12, 15, 17 and 20 meters, and then one big one for 40. The 40 meter one is approximately 31 foot long. The 20 meter one is obviously half of that, around about 16.5 to 17 feet. It has to be a quarter wave. Now, this is why that trolley works, and works so effectively. I'm getting almost, well, as near as I can, 100% efficiency from the quarter wave vertical. I mentioned the ground tuning unit. The power that I use is approximately 80 watts, although I can drop it, and I've dropped it down to working VK with just 1 watt. The key to it is, like everything else, tune the antenna anyway. So I go straight onto low power with the transceiver. I think the lowest power that I can get out of that is round about 4 watts. If I drop the voltage purposely to say 9 volts, and I'm really pushing it at that, I can drop it down to 9 volts, and it'll probably be getting 1.5 watts out, because obviously the power output is pro rata to the voltage on input to the transceiver. The key to it is tuning up the aerial to make sure it's working with a 1-to-1 SWR. I have a through switch on the ATU, and it's nearly always 1.1 and no more than 1.2 or 1.3 to 1. So what I do is I use the ATU by just peaking it slightly to get me 1-to-1. And it literally, the needle sits flat on the bottom at 1-to-1. And then I use the GTU. So I'm still on 10 watts. And what I do is I put a carrier out on a clear frequency, obviously. And then I peak the GTU, which has got a meter, so that I'm forcing ground current to ground. There's no RF. Well, there's 10 watts, but what I'm doing is I'm peaking 2 components of a GTU. One is a coil of hard drawn wire, drawn steel or aluminium wire, together with, in series, a capacitor of about 500 picofarad. So you're roughly looking at the same size capacitor as what you'd have in a normal antenna tuning unit. And what I'm in effect doing is I'm slowly alternating the inductance and the capacitance of the ground tuning unit. And on the meter, I'm looking for a maximum deflection on the meter of the ground current going as high as possible. In other words, forcing into the ground the ground current, in effect matching the vertical antenna above the trolley. In it, what I'm doing is I'm using a quarter wave above the trolley, and the quarter wave in the ground forms the other half of a dipole. And I'm using the quarter wave, which gives a good low angle takeoff, and then using the salt lagoon water, which is very shallow. And because it's shallow and it's directly coming through like tributaries from the sea, it's quite dense in salt. And it's getting a perfect reflection in what's called the Fresnel zone. That's usually within 2.5 wavelengths and really no more reflection. Now, when Peter in his video a month or so ago, or whatever, said that if you're near the salt water, you can get double reflections. Yes, you can. And I think that is what's happening, that I'm getting an acute angle takeoff, very low angle, 11 degrees, 12, 13, 14 degrees. But it's also because the salt lagoon is a mile or two wide inland, I'm getting a second reflection off it. I think that's what's happening. Bearing in mind, a lot of this is guesswork, because you can't see the signal. You can't see any red line hitting the salt water. And the takeoff is such that I'm hearing DX so clearly. The low angle is actually beating the beams that are horizontally polarized, whether they're 60 foot above ground or 100 foot above ground. And that is why I hear DX before the other stations hear them. That's why my good friend G4AKC in Blackpool hears the DX, because he's in Blackpool at the side of the sea, and he's hearing the DX with his quarter wave vertical before those with the beams that are inland in the UK can hear the same station. We're getting that real sharp low angle. And then what happens after about 15 to 30 minutes, the low angle starts to fade, and the beams that are inland start to hear the DX with their horizontal antennas. It's how propagation works. And we can still work them, but it starts to fade off. And that's why the guys with the big TH7s and step IRs and other big beams work them with their 400 watts or 600 watts then, and that happens all across the continent. So that's how it works. There are no occasions when I don't get a good GTU full scale deflection. And the reason why is because the trolley sits, although it's got wheels, very small wheels on it, the base plate of the trolley is metal. But what I've done to give me a good capacitance to ground, and basically the thinnest, that's the right word, the thinnest capacitance sheet to ground is a sheet of plastic. Now that is my idea. I thought if I'm capacitively coupling this to ground, I'll make sure by putting a sheet of plastic about 2 foot by 2 foot underneath the trolley. So that's what I do. And by doing that, it increases the signals even more. Sometimes I have walked with the trolley and walked off the sheet and walked about 10 yards and the signal goes down. And then as I walk back towards the sheet and stand it upright on the sheet, the signal comes back up again. So that's what I do. That's how it works. So that's the system in use. What's developed from that? Well, obviously, I got a lot of recognition for what I was doing. So much so that there's a saying, isn't there? Activity breeds activity, and it sure did, because I realized very quickly that because I'm in the south of Spain, I would hear DX, but I wanted to make sure I could hear lots of UK stations, and I sure did. I have to pick the right time of the day for propagation. And what I did is I got a notoriety throughout the UK of being one of the main pedestrian mobile radio users. But the key to what I was doing is that I was saying I was in the salt lagoons, and that well, I didn't alert them, but DX News on Twitter got to know of this. And I received a message from the DX News on Twitter asking me what it was that I was doing. So I sent a picture back of what you've just seen at the side of the salt lagoons, the trolley, and I told them where I was. And then I thought, to enhance this a little bit more, I'll make sure I give the grid square. So that's why I gave the grid square, and that's why I do it on all my contacts. I tell them I am in India, Mexico, 98, Quebec Delta, because to try and locate somebody on a salt lagoon means nothing. But if you give them the grid square, they can usually locate you within about 300 or 400 yards. Obviously, Peter, G4VZV, called me on one occasion and said, "You're a tremendous signal. I've never heard anyone coming through like this." And pedestrian mobile as well. I was 5 and 9 with him, 5.9 plus. And he asked me, he said, "Can I contact you by email? And can I do something on video and maybe get it into the practical wireless?" I said, "Yeah, contact me by email." So he did. Within 48 hours, I got an email from him, and that's where the videos come from. Then I was on air and I spoke to G4USI, who was on here a few weeks ago, Damon, doing his presentation on the low power radios like the Zygu. And now, because of that, he's asking me if I will do updates for Radcom. I also did my own article in Practical Wireless, and now I do updates for Practical Wireless. And I'm in this month's that came this morning through the letterbox with, again, half a page of picture and quite a lot of information about who I've worked. I'm a member of what's called the Real HF Group, which is actually run by G4AKC over in Blackpool. And he and I are on WhatsApp together. And what we do is when I'm down there, I work together with him on WhatsApp. And we have our phones open, left not on transmit mode, but listening for any messages. And we work the DX together. And a phenomenon that happened this year was in August and September, when I was down there, the band was opening up for me in Southern Europe a lot earlier than it was for stations in the Northern Hemisphere, in the northern part of Europe. And I was working a string of DX, VKs and ZLs, and David couldn't hear them. But within 40 minutes, 45 minutes, as the propagation changed, the signals were dropping slightly with me by an S point, maybe 2 S points, but they were increasing for David up in Blackpool. And he then worked the stations that I were working. but he was approximately 40 minutes behind. What will all this come to? Well, I'm looking at doing maybe another presentation to another radio club. That's in the pipeline. I'm a member of the IPA Radio Club. That's the International Police Association Radio Club, obviously from my previous job. And they really do want to push for me to go back down when I can. What's in it for me now for the future? Well, I've just got hold of this recently, which, if any of you can see, is a Klansman backpack. It's very light. I can hold it in one hand. And I've just got hold of, in the last 48 hours, another FT857D and another antenna and an ATU, and I've got a GTU, which is slightly different to the one I've got on the trolley down in Spain. And I'm going to build a backpack radio so I can take it to the east coast to sunny Cleethorpes, obviously when it warms up a little bit. So I'm looking at end of January, February, it might start to go there. And I'm going to do a little bit of backpack operation with a very lightweight battery on there, which is probably going to be a 22 amp hour battery, so I can work on 50 watts. And I'm going to see, because I'm on the east coast of the UK, I should be able to work many Asian stations, many stations from the Indian Ocean, and possibly short path to VK and ZL as well. So that's what I'm doing for the future. If there's anybody who wants to ask me any questions about anything, any part of what I've just described, certainly go ahead and ask me anything. I wrote notes, and I think I've just about come towards the end of it now. The only other thing I'll say is I've also got plans with Charles. Some of you may know him. His call sign is Mike 0 Oscar X-ray Oscar. He's in Wakefield, UK, and he's the #1, without a doubt, #1 QSL manager in the world. And he's also got contacts with the IOTA organization. And when I've got the backpack done, if it works successfully here, I'm going to take it down to Spain, and I'm going to go backpack from an island which is just off the coast of Alicante, and it's just is 6 miles off the coast. I think if from what I've been told, if it's more than 5 miles, it's classed as an IOTA island. I think it's IOTA number 095. But I'm hoping to activate that for possibly 4 hours at a time. So that will really, really give me some more notoriety. Not that I was chasing it or anything, but it's just come naturally. So anything else, if there's anything that, and any questions from anyone, certainly now's your opportunity to ask me, whether it's about the trolley, about the stations, about the propagation, or anything else, just fire away.
Brilliant, Ken. That was exciting and inspiring all at the same time. So well done to you, to your exploits. Who's got a question or comment they want to put to Ken? Andrew.
I just want you to explain to me, Ken, being a bit new to this. I heard you mention you stand trolley on a plastic sheet, but is there any sort of ground radials or earth rod connected to your GTU or anything like that?
No, there isn't. What? Right, let me just explain. Although there's only probably 3 or 4 different parts to this radio station, there's several things that is important. There are no ground radials. There are no counterpoise wires. All I'm doing is, what happens is, where the antenna comes down onto the vertical aerial comes down here at the feed point, I tap into that braiding because bearing in mind it's the other half of the dipole, I tap into the braiding with the shortest possible connection. And I mean short, it's no more than 3 to 4 inches. And then it's connected into the ground tuning unit, where what happens is I'm forcing through that GTU, and then it comes out of the other end past the coil and the capacitor, which, like I said, are series connected in series. And when it comes out the other end, it's tapped again with the shortest connection, only 2 or 3 inches, and actually bolted. I haven't got a welder down in Spain. So what I've done is I've welded braiding from UR67. And what I've done is I've wrapped the wrapped the braiding in tape so it doesn't get weathered, and that protects it to some degree. And then I've drilled through the frame of the trolley and bolted onto it, and then smothered that in petroleum jelly, because petroleum jelly protects it from the salt and from weather. And what I've done is in effect, I'm then using the trolley as an earth wire. It's like you having an earth wire at your station, but that trolley then goes down to the sheet of plastic, and then it forces through it's hard to describe. It doesn't force it through the plastic as such. What it's doing, it's capacitively coupled to the ground and bypasses the plastic like a capacitor does, and forces into the ground the maximum current to create the image of the quarter wave above. And I'm explaining it really simply now so that anybody could do this. And you get in an almost perfect half wave dipole. And if anybody here has ever used an half wave dipole in their own garden, not horizontal, vertically, you will work DX that you probably can't hear when it's horizontal. And that's what I'm doing. That's it in a nutshell.
Brilliant, thanks for that.
It's okay.
Good description.
Yeah, Ken and Andrew, I've put into the chat the link to Dave, G4AKC's website, where he gives an explanation of the ground tuning unit that Ken's just been going through, and some good illustrations and photographs as well there.
Oh, good, thanks, Nick.
Okay, who's got a question to Ken or a comment to Ken? Yeah, Roger.
Hi, Ken. I know we've talked about this before. Very interesting, of course. One thing you haven't mentioned, I wondered how long it took to tune up when you were changing bands or changing locations. And do you see a difference from one day to the next or one location to the next, you know, in the time it takes to tune up and the amount of effort it takes?
Really good question, but I can answer it quite simply. It's a good question because not many would have thought of that one. I did explain that when I walk off a sheet of plastic, it alters it. And that's because I'm not getting a good capacitive coupling to ground. In fact, if anything, I'm actually touching ground. So it's not very good. Yeah, but does it change from day to day? No, it doesn't. If I go back to the same location and put the sheet under the trolley, and I actually do go back to the same location almost precisely because I've marked it on the ground. I put a little mark so I know where it is. But if I walked anywhere around the salt lagoon, all that would happen is I would have to tune it slightly because the ground is not always the same. Bearing in mind, you've got to stay in like a Fresnel zone. If I got a bucket and put some water where I'm before I put the trolley in position, if I put some water from the lagoon, a bucket full of water, right at the side, bearing in mind I only work no more than about a metre from the edge of the salt lagoon water, and the ground was wet, it probably would improve it more. because I'm
Yes.
on wet
Yeah.
ground.
So take a bucket and wet the ground first, didn't you?
You could do. Now here's food for thought. And no one's asked me this yet, although it's swimming around in my mind. If I built the same trolley here in the UK and decided to go up onto the A628 above Penistone, where it's very high up, would I get the same effect if I was in the clear? The answer to it is I would get half of it, but not the other half. The two-prong approach. I wouldn't have the salt water to give me the perfect ground plane effect, but I would use the GTU and it would start to increase, forcing the current to ground. It depends on the type of ground. If you're near like marshy ground, it would improve. If you're near the wet sand on the sea, it would improve. If you're on rock or concrete, it's not as good. You're connecting to ground, but it's not the same. You're not getting the same reflection. Someone did ask me once, do you get the same effect if you're near fresh water? And I don't know the answer. I've never tried it, but what I have done is I've read up about it. And I've read a lot on the internet and in books. I've got more radio antenna books than you can imagine. And what I've gleaned from that is, if you go near a large freshwater lake or a reservoir that's fresh water, you will actually get a slight increase in the low angle takeoff. But that's nothing compared to what happens when you're near dense salt water. So it will enhance it, maybe it will enhance it a little bit, but will never be the same as when you're near salt water. What happens with salt? I don't know. There's a chemical reaction in the water with salt, and it just
the conductivity will be improved.
Yeah, the conductivity. It's like a sheet of copper. It is. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I just wondered but
Yeah.
you've answered that. Thank you. Interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roger, and good answer, Ken. Richard, over to you.
Yep. Well, you answered one of the questions I had, which was about the fresh water, if you're near fresh water. But the other question I was thinking of was, does the shape of the body of water that you're nearby actually make a difference? And if it's the sea, does any sort of turbulence in the sea make a difference? The reason I ask is that I frequently go down to Dorset, and my sister lives just outside Weymouth on the Isle of Portland, and there are two massive bodies of water. One is Portland Harbour and the other is the saltwater lagoon of the Fleet. And I wonder if that if the shape of those would make a difference to any signal propagation at that point.
Well, my experience is, because I've walked out on the headland at the town of Guadamar down in Spain, and that goes 500 meters out into the sea. It's only about 10 foot wide. You can't get a car down there. It's just a walking path that goes out to the sea. My experience with that, when I'm about 6 foot above the sea, above the water, but I'm surrounded by it because it's a headland that goes out, is that it is good, but it's not as good as the lagoon water. It's the same water, it's salt water, but I think because the lagoon is only no more than about 1.5 foot deep, and I actually did test it by putting my hand in it and licking it. And believe me, it's like having table salt in your mouth. It really is dense. Whereas the sea, you all know that sea is salty, but not to that extent. Now, does it work in different direction? I think that's like what your question was.
Yeah.
Absolutely it does. And that's why I have different locations to go to, which is what I mentioned in my initial presentation. I have found the perfect location on those videos that you've seen, where the shape of the lagoon is, it's not round, it's a bit of a weird shape, but it goes out, it literally does go out in a round shape, but it's you know, it's not round, it's going out in different directions, but it goes nearly 2 miles in a southwesterly and a westerly direction, which I knew immediately when I spotted this location. Thought that might be good for long distance, long path to the Pacific. And it is, because your signal when you're beaming long path to the Pacific is going southwesterly and westerly, and it curves, and then it curves down over South America. So what I think is happening is I'm getting an acute sharp angle takeoff on the salt lagoon. It's either bouncing, or it may be bouncing more than just one spot. But what's happening is I'm getting a second bounce in the Atlantic, and maybe the third bounce off the ionosphere is in the Pacific. So I'm missing the landmass. And as a result of that, that's why the other guy in Blackpool, G4AKC, has got nothing really between him and the Pacific, apart from the Atlantic. It's nearly the same.
Yeah, and it's also Blackpool Beach is a bit like Southport, miles and miles and miles of very shallow sea.
What he has said to me is that because it's tidal, when the sea goes out, and it goes out many hundreds of yards, it's not as good. He waits, and as the sea, it actually checks, as well as checking propagation, it checks when high tide's coming in, so that he can walk to the edge of the promenade and the sea's below him, and he knows he'll work DX. He's only interested in working DX. That's it. That's his claim to fame. Whereas when I'm in Spain, I picked up really quick that not only can I work the DX, which eventually you sort of think, well, that's just another VK, another ZL, but I like working the G stations because it gave me the note. You see, he can't work the G stations, I can. So I'm getting I'm getting the G stations and the Americans thinking, who is this guy down in the salt lagoons? Because nobody else does it.
No, that's great. Thanks. I was just thinking that the salt lagoon, well, there's a salt lagoon at the Fleet that runs behind Chesil Bank. And that is definitely a southwesterly location, but because it curves, you'd have to pick your spot to attempt it from.
Well, I go to a different part of the salt lagoon when I want to work United Kingdom, because across that road where you saw a little bit of traffic, and there's another salt lagoon on there, which is predominantly north and northeast, and I can work UK like just so easy. Well, that's obviously how Peter heard me. G4VZV.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Ken. Brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Good questions there. Anyone else with a question or comment to Ken? Yeah, Gerald.
Mute. Sorry. Hi there, Ken. Brilliant. Thank you for your talk. That's I've tried lots of vertical aerials in the past, and including dragging one in a baby buggy once when my son was very young, and all the wheels slowly dropped off until eventually the last wheel on my wagon just enough to get it back. But I never tried actually doing that idea of having the thing under the platform, but I did always put a piece of wire into the sea. I was dropping a wire down into the sea for an earth connection, and that made a huge difference compared to just sticking it somewhere back in the sand or whatever. So that's the same theory, isn't it?
I did actually throw a piece of white. Whilst I've been away in August, I did something very, very unusual. I decided to try 80 meters on the trolley, which is almost an impossibility, because I can't put 60 foot up. I can put 30 foot up, but I can't put 62 or 63, whatever feet. So what I did is I cut another piece of wire, and before I went out, I joined them together. So that 40-meter quarter wave became an 80-meter quarter wave. And I cut it for the top end of 80 meters. And I went out, and what happened was the pole went up to 30 foot, but because the rest of the wire was pulling on it, it started to bend. So it finished up a bit shaped like a letter U, but upside down letter U. And what I did is I pulled it out slightly away so that it was about 8 feet above the sand. So I used a rock on the sand to anchor some nylon cord to it. And I did work into the UK, and I worked Russia, UK, Sweden. I had to use the angle. Firstly, I didn't do it at the salt lagoons because it's just too dark there. There's no lights. So I went by the sea, and I did it where there are some lights every 100, 200 yards. But even that wasn't enough. I had to use the moonlight, and it was the moonlight that afforded me good light onto the sand. And I pulled it over, and it tuned up fantastic. Absolutely, I couldn't believe it, because I thought at first it'd probably be about 1.6 to 1, but it was almost 1 to 1. And I've got a different idea for next summer, and that is, instead of putting up 30 foot vertical and then angling over another 30 odd foot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some capacitive hat wires on the top. So it's like a top loaded vertical for 80, but it's only as high as a 40 meter. And the capacity hats will give me the required resonant frequency. It'll be touch and go as to whether that works, but if it does, it'll be even better, I think. So yeah, that's another thing for next summer. Yeah.
Good idea. I might try and copy your idea next time I'm over in France and using that capacity hat method. It's a good one.
Well, the measurements for 80 meters, I've already worked them out, is 28 foot vertical and 21 foot, 4 wires, 21 foot long each.
Well, thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Ken. Anyone else with a question or comment to Ken? No, no one else with a comment to Ken? Okay, well, look, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ken. That was a fantastic explanation. Can we first of all show appreciation to Ken in the normal way, everyone? Yes, that was great, Ken. And I tell you what's great about the work you're doing is that you're doing it like most of us do as an amateur, and playing around and seeing what actually works and what doesn't work. That really, when we're trying to do anything with antennas, is the way, isn't it, Ken? Is to play, and sometimes things will work as you expect them to, and sometimes they won't. And you know, carry on finessing the ones that do work. And you've proved it, I think, with your setup down there.
Yep, thanks very much. Yeah, cheers.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you, Ken, and thank you, everyone. I'm just going to end record and thank everyone, and just remind people that next week we have Bob Heil from Heil Sound, well-known radio amateur, speaking and giving us a few new things and a few new ideas for us to think about. So I'm just going to stop record. Thank you, everyone.